Welcome to episode 11 of the Andy Bashir podcast. That's right, we've made it 11 episodes in. You can download the podcast on all major platforms, but also subscribe to our YouTube channel at Andy Bashir Podcast. Today, we've got a great episode. We're going to talk to Maryland Governor Wes Moore. We're going to have the return of both Johns. You're going to hear in my Kentucky accent how political violence is wrong. This is going to be a good episode, so let's get to it. This is the Andy Bashir Podcast, and our guest this week, I'm excited about. He is the governor of Maryland and a good friend of mine, Wes Moore, in his first term, just killing it with an economy that is on fire there in Maryland. Wes, welcome to the podcast.
It's great to see you, man. Congratulations. This is awesome.
Well, we're excited to have you. I want to start out by pointing out your background's different than a lot of other, certainly Democratic governors, if not other governors. You know, I came from the Attorney General world. Other people have come from Congress or their state legislator. You have a different path. Tell us about it.
Yeah, you know, it really is. It's pretty unusual. And I say I'm probably the most improbable governor that I know our state has seen. Where, to your point, like I come from a family, as people have said, that is not used to making policies and more used to having the policies done to us. Where, you know, I'm literally a person who, you know, had handcuffs on my wrist by the time I was 11 years old. I was raised by an immigrant single mom because my dad died in front of me when I was 3. You know, I joined the Army when I was 17. I went to a 2-year college, and my background was I was in the military. I was in the private sector. I worked in finance, and I ran one of the largest poverty fighting organizations in this country. And what was interesting was that I was doing a lot of work with the former governor. And we're doing work on child poverty, which was one of the big reasons why I got into this work, man. I mean, as you know, it's just and I that's one of the reasons I love your leadership is that I just do not understand how a civilized society allows so many children to grow up in poverty. I just do not. It's fundamentally it's something I'll never get my head wrapped around. And we were working with a former governor on the issue of the child tax credit and how to enhance it because it could have a deep impact on child poverty. And I told him, you should talk about it in your state of the state. And so I even gave him the line he should use. I mean, it was great. And then I got an advanced copy of the speech. There was nothing in there about child poverty, nothing in there about the child tax credit. So I was pissed off. And so I called up the head of public policy of the organization that I ran. And I was just like going off. And after I finally breathed, after a couple of minutes, he said to me, he said, listen, we worked for months to try to get him to include a line in the speech, but what if you could write the whole speech? And that was kind of the point, right? It's like, you know, that's one of the beautiful things that we get to do as governors is we get to write the whole speech. And so I decided to make a run at governor, and you know, there was like 12 people running, statewide elected officials, 2 Obama cabinet secretaries. The former head of the DNC was running, the former head of the Democratic Party was running for governor, and then me, the guy who had no political background.
And you beat them all.
And we ended up getting more individual votes than anyone who'd ever run for governor in the history of the state of Maryland.
So you just nailed one of our podcast rules. And one of our podcast rules is tell your why. What got you into this? What motivated you? I remember Amy Klobuchar, who we're all thinking about right now, with what happened in Minnesota, talked about getting kicked out of the hospital, you know, a day after giving birth while her daughter is still in the ICU. Your why, so many children in poverty and suffering, I guess not only got you to run for this job, but right now is so important in speaking out with the damage that big anything but beautiful bill could cause, especially to our children.
It is in a word, this bill is just cruel.
Yes.
It's just heartless. I mean, you're literally talking about, I mean, Andy, this bill, if passed as is, right? You're talking about kicking about 76,000 of my children into poverty. overnight. There is such a there is a heartlessness that exists in the way this bill is pulled together. And I just do not understand how we can be a civilized society when the future of our children is being determined before they even have a say, before they even have a chance. And so when people, the reason that you and that I and so many of our other governors have actually taken this all of the above approach when it comes to supporting our children is because when people say, well, how does child poverty show itself? What should we do? Is it education? Is it the environment? Is it transportation? It's like, and the answer is yes, guys. The answer is yes, because poverty is like water. When water flows in, it does not choose to go left or right. Water goes everywhere where there's a hole. And it just leaves mold and mildew and decay and death everywhere it goes, right? And so how does poverty show itself? How does child poverty show itself? It shows itself in the air that we're asking our children to breathe, in the water that we are asking them to drink, in the homes we are asking them to grow up in the way that they are policed, in the schools that they attend, in the transportation assets they have or do not have. It is everything. It's water. And so I just think that when you look at this bill that is talking about things like cutting Medicaid
for 16 million people,
it's insane. It is insane. And it is so heartless. And it doesn't have to be done.
Right.
And that's the thing that I think is so brutally abusive about the way this bill was pulled together, and why I'm so thankful to stand with you and so many others just to push back and fight back against this.
Well, maybe one of the reasons that it also fires us up so much is it doesn't work. We are both common sense, common ground, get things done,
right.
Public officials and governors. And this adds to the federal debt and then blows a hole in both of our budgets that we have to balance under state law.
That's exactly right. It makes our job immeasurably more difficult, because what it's essentially saying is that the relationship between the federal government and our states is severed. You're on your own. That's essentially what it is saying to each and every one of us. And we take our jobs very seriously. We take our governance very seriously. We take the fact that we are both fiscally disciplined and the fact that we are morally conscious, that we take those two things and say, you don't have to choose between those two aspects and those two elements. But what it's also saying is that we have always prided ourselves on the idea that we move in partnership with the federal government. That whether we're talking about children in Kentucky or children in Maryland or children in Florida or children in Mississippi or children in Iowa, they are all our children. And the federal government has a unique responsibility to not just take a place of support for the kids, but support for the leaders whose job it is to also help protect our children as well. And what they are saying is that relationship is now severed, and you are on your own. And so when we're talking about a bill, to your point, that is going to explode the national deficit by a group who's also talking about fiscal responsibility, that is going to destroy a measure of supports for people, and particularly the most vulnerable in our society, and doing it while at the same time, because you're trying to create space so you can provide tax cuts to the most wealthy in our society. I cannot express enough how against this bill that I am. And to your point, not because of a political ideology, not because, oh, this is a Democratic talking point, but it's because I know math. And I know what this is going to do to the people of my state. And I know what it's going to do to the prospects and the hopes for everyone who calls the state of Maryland and Kentucky and all these other states home.
You're listening to the Andy Bashir podcast. Our guest, Maryland Governor Wes Moore. So, Wes, you're now more than halfway through your first term. Very excited that I know you're going to seek a second term.
That's right.
You were tested really early in your governorship with the bridge and the loss of life and property, and it being such a major thoroughfare. I thought you did a great job in not only how quickly it was repaired, but how you communicated about it. Tell us about being tested so early.
Thank you, brother. And also, I do want to say publicly also as well that one of the first outreaches that I got from any state chief executive was you. And I'm never going to forget it, and just how much I appreciate it. It's one thing that I know we all learned at baby governor school when we first were governors elect, when they said if you have not been tested yet with a tragedy, just give it a second. Yours is coming.
I'm an
You've seen
off-year
it over and
election.
over. Yeah.
They didn't do a school for me. I didn't know there was one.
And you've had to deal with them over and over and over again.
Over.
So God bless you. But it was, I mean, I think one thing we've all learned in these jobs is when your phone rings in the middle of the night, you're never about to get good news. Yeah. I would say no one ever calls me at 3 o'clock in the morning and says, "Hey, Gov, great news," because the good news waits until the morning. It's the bad news that wakes you up in the middle of the night. And it was at 2:02 in the morning when my phone rang, and my chief of staff told me that the Key Bridge was gone. And the Key Bridge is almost a 2-mile long bridge that really stood guard over Baltimore. I did not know what the Baltimore skyline looked like without the Key Bridge, because it's been there since I've been alive. And we found out that a ship the size of 3 football fields had slammed into the Key Bridge, and it collapsed instantaneously. And in addition to now seeing 13% of my state's economy shut down, and thousands of port workers who were hours away from waking up and realized they no longer had a job, I also found out that there were six workers who were fixing potholes in the middle of the night, who, when that bridge collapsed, fell 180 feet into cold, frigid, and dark waters, and lost their lives. And so it was something that first morning, we immediately put the state on a state of emergency, but then had to get in front of the state and get in front of the world. And I let the people of my state know that we were going to be okay, because we were Maryland tough and we were Baltimore strong. And that we would work around the clock if necessary to accomplish 4 objectives. We needed to make sure we were providing comfort and closure to those 6 families who lost individuals that morning. We needed to make sure that we provided support to all of everyone impacted, our workers, their families, the small businesses that served the area. That we were going to make sure we clear the federal channel as quickly as possible. And you're right, and thank you. We're able to. They told us it's going to take 11 months to get that federal channel cleared, and we got it cleared in 11 weeks. And we're in. And the 4th objective was, we're going to rebuild the Francis Scott Key Bridge. And so I think about the collection of the state, because I was really proud of our state, the way we stood together, the way we banded together, the way there was no daylight between ourselves, our local leaders, our private sector leaders, the work of the federal government. And again, I give a huge amount of thankfulness and credit to our federal leadership, the Biden administration, for how they just stood with us the entire time. And it was a really difficult and trying time for our state. But I'm just deeply grateful for the fact that Maryland really showed, how to respond in these moments of crisis.
Isn't it amazing how you see the good in people, the humanity, and in the times of greatest difficulty? Some of our leaders want to turn us against each other, but that's not who we are. And I think you saw that in that moment, and I've seen that after storm after storm after storm.
That's right. And I tell you, Andy, it's something that's so powerful, because I think back to, people ask, they're like, what prepared you for this? They're like, you were never a mayor, you were never a county executive, you were never, what prepared you to be able to lead in that moment? And my answer was simple. I was a soldier. I led soldiers in combat in Afghanistan as a member of the 82nd Airborne Division. And one of the most powerful things that I remember over there was how on every single mission, the way that we worked together. And to your point, without a political bent, where, I every single one of the soldiers that I serve with, a question I never once asked a single one of them: what's your political party? I'm not built that way. Or asking, how'd you vote in the last election? I never once asked any of my soldiers that question. The only thing that we knew was when times were tough, we banded together and we took care of each other. And we made sure that it was our job to not just accomplish the mission, but it was my job to make sure that my brothers and sisters made it home to their families, right? And so I love how in these times of triumph and tragedy, in these times of conflict and celebration, we are one. We band together, and it is really beautiful to see the way that our jurisdictions, really pull together and remember at the end of the day, if we are all truly God's children, then by definition we are brothers and sisters. So it's important that we act accordingly.
We're in the middle of our conversation with Maryland Governor Wes Moore. Wes, I've always found that when you get through the challenging times and you get through them together, you get to some good times and you get to those together. Tell us about the economy in Maryland.
Yeah, I'm so grateful because one of the things we really wanted to push was that some of the biggest challenges we had within our state was I just inherited a sluggish economy, where if you look at the 7 years before I became the governor, we saw how spending in our state increased by 70%, but our GDP increased in less than half of the national average. So the problem was we were spending, but we weren't growing. And what we had to do was make sure we were getting people back into the economy, making sure we're removing the barriers that were keeping people from getting back into the economy, and ensuring that we can use that as a way of getting our economic engine going again. And not only have we seen now how Maryland's economy is now moving at a clip that we have not seen in a long period of time. We're having population increases in the state of Maryland, but we've also been able to do things that I think were really important. So we were able to do things like making Maryland the first state in the country that now has a service year option for all of our high school graduates. So now our high school graduates have a chance to have a year of service. But what it's also done is it's allowed them to get back into the workforce, or get into the workforce in a way that they're being trained, and in a way they're actually having these pipelines. That we were able to do the largest mass pardon in the history of the United States of America, where I pardoned 175,000 misdemeanor cannabis convictions, because we had a lot of people who could not get a barber's license, could not get a student loan, could not get a home loan for a misdemeanor cannabis conviction from the 1990s. And so we got rid of that we've quadrupled the amount of people in apprenticeship programs and trade programs in the state of Maryland, saying that we have some of the best four-year colleges in America, and we love that. But we need to end this myth that every single one of our students need to attend one of them in order to be economically successful. So what's been the result? Maryland, when I was first inaugurated, Maryland was 43rd in the country in unemployment. Now we're going on 15 straight months of amongst the lowest unemployment rates in the entire country. Our unemployment rate right now is 3.1%, more than a full point lower than the national average. And so the thing that I love about this is saying, like, this really is about the economy. It's about work, wages, and wealth. How can you get people into the workforce? How can you increase their wages to make sure they're getting paid a fair way and not disincentivizing work? And how can you give them an opportunity at wealth? And when I say wealth, that just simply means having the ability to pass something off to your children besides debt. And so that's been our North Star that we have for economic growth in the state of Maryland. And even despite the headwinds that we are now seeing from the federal government, like this arbitrary and in many cases illegal firing of federal workers, that we've been able to keep our eyes on the prize and really stay focused, and being able to drive, to your point that you made earlier, that what we do as governors, we drive real results for the people of our state.
And I think you're giving great examples, and I could give some great examples about how Democratic leadership, especially in that governor's seat, have built these great economies, when there's this myth out there that somehow Republicans do that better. I think we've seen the exact opposite. Certainly you from your predecessor, and me from mine. But where I want to shift to now is exactly what you're talking about, is what I think we've got to be focused on as a Democratic Party and the National Democratic Party, addressing people's everyday needs. And I know you've been out traveling just like I have, trying to make sure that we are focused as a party. I know you're just down in South Carolina. Tell us a little bit about the message you're spreading out there.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, because the first message I was spreading was we met with a handful of businesses, because I was trying to get them to come to the state of Maryland. So the first message we're spreading is, come to Maryland. as I know you're doing with
We,
Kentucky.
we may be competing there.
No, but it's actually, but this is a good thing because that's
Yes.
part of our job, right? Part of our job is to go out and make sure that every single corner of the state, every single corner of the country knows that our states are the places that people should, come to and grow and build. So we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we were not going out other places and pitching for our state.
I believe that wholeheartedly, in that our first job isn't to be a Democratic governor, but to be the best governor that we can be for our people. And I've seen you've taken some stances just like I have, where sometimes you might not agree with the national party or even your state party, but you got to do what you think's right.
That, and one of the things I really and I appreciate about your leadership too, Andy, is that I always tell about, I don't take my talking points from a party, right? I don't even know what that means. And the fact that for there's something that I take very seriously and very personally, and I know you do as well, is a party did not elect me governor.
Mm-hmm.
The people did, right? The party did not cast a ballot. The people did. In fact, in many cases, like, I was not the party's choice during the primary. So I take that responsibility very seriously, that it was the people who decided. And if you look at the numbers, it wasn't just because I won Democrats. We won Democrats, we won independents, we won a real chunk of Republicans who ended up voting for us. And so our work is not to take a talking point or a policy position from this amorphous party, right? Our job is to make sure every single decision is clearly aligned with what do we think is the vision and the values of the people of our state. And is that at times going to put me at odds with the party? Yeah. And I'm good with it, because I'll never forget who put me in office in the first place.
That's a really good point, because we get asked so many times what should be the focus of the Democratic Party when we're out there talking about what should be the focus of the United States of America. What I always think when I talk about focusing on jobs, healthcare, infrastructure, public education, and public safety, I say, yes, I want Democrats to do it, but I want Republicans to do it too. And just think about how much we get done. All right, on this podcast, and the Andy Bashir podcast with our guest, Wes Moore, we like to have a little fun in ways that our viewers can get to know you. So I'm thinking about some similarities that we have. You are a New York Times best-selling author, and I've been rejected for a book deal twice. But my dog has published 2. So tell us about your success as an author, and give me some tips.
You don't need any tips, man. I am not the one to give you tips on that. You have an amazing story. But it's wild because it's funny. When I first, I have more of a quantitative mind than a qualitative mind. Like, I like numbers and data. Words are much harder for me. Numbers are much easier for my brain than words are. And so I remember when I first started writing, my mother was even like, I don't know if you can actually do this. And she was very skeptical of my ability to actually sit down and write a book. But I was really thankful because, and one of the reasons I really encourage you to do it too is, one thing I found about the book writing process is actually very cathartic, and it's very peaceful, because not often do you get a chance to really be at one and at peace with your ideas and your thoughts and process everything. And I also really believe if you don't write this stuff down, Annie, you're gonna forget it. And some of this stuff is just good for you to have. And even if you never plan on publishing anything, I'm just talking about, like, even for, like, your kids, watching.
I would have 2 readers. I actually doubt either of my kids would fully get through my book. And please don't ask me if I've read every chapter of my dad's. All right, if you have, what is your secret superpower that people don't know? I'll tell you mine. Mine is cooking the Thanksgiving turkey. So I can do it better than just about anybody I know, but it's only useful one day a year.
I need to come through to your house then.
There you go. Come on over for Thanksgiving.
I would love that. I'd love that. I would say, honestly, I'd probably stay in that neighborhood, and it's cooking. It's not necessarily Thanksgiving, but I learned how to cook Jamaican food
Ooh.
from my grandmother, who was actually born in Cuba and raised in Jamaica. And when I was getting in trouble, when I was coming up, like what she would do was she would make me basically be her sous chef, because that was her way of keeping me off the streets. That was her way of keeping me out of trouble. And so when I come back from school, she'd force me. She'd be like, "You have to come help me cook dinner." And so she taught me how to like cut things up and how to, really help her. But that was the time when I fell in love with Jamaican food. And so if you want to have an amazing Jamaican meal, I'm talking like curry chicken and curry goat and oxtail and jerk chicken and ackee and saltfish and all of it. Like I'm kind of your guy, Alan.
All
Kind
right.
of your guy.
To close us out, if you could go back in time and tell yourself to not participate in one fashion trend that you went all in on, what would it be?
Oh, that's such a good question. You know what I'd have to say? In fact, I can't believe I'm even acknowledging that I did this. Do you remember the group Crisscross
Oh yeah.
and how they wore their pants backwards?
Oh yeah, they're gonna make you jump.
They gonna make you jump. That was one where I have seen pictures of myself with my jeans on backwards,
That is amazing.
and I'm like, yo, what the hell were you thinking, man? Like that was just some crazy shit.
Just to be fair, so you got it on me. I had a bowl cut, and man, if I could go back in time. This has been the Andy Bashir podcast with our guest Wes Moore, the best sous chef governor that we know of. We've loved having you on, Wes. Thanks for your time.
You're the best, Andy. Thank you, man. Congratulations again.
You're listening to the Andy Bashir podcast. Now it's time for the segment called In My Kentucky Accent. This week, we've got to talk about a sad but necessary topic, and that's political violence. What we saw over the weekend was the political assassination of a state representative in Minnesota, also the murder of that individual's spouse and the attempted murder of two other individuals. Political violence and all violence is wrong, and it hurts those families so badly. I lost one of my closest friends 2.5 years ago in a shooting, and I know that the grief journey is all that much harder, especially when someone is ripped from you in that kind of way. But political violence is avoidable, and it's avoidable if our leaders are more responsible. We can disagree with each other. We can even disagree strongly, but we have to make sure that we are not putting out the rhetoric that suggests someone else is the enemy, is evil, or is any less of an American than we are. When you say that the left or the right is trying to tear down and destroy our country, when you talk about somebody else being not patriotic because of their views, you're attempting to make them an enemy. There was a time in this country where we were Americans first and Democrats and Republicans second, third, or fourth, and we've got to get back to that place. We cannot have a chilling effect on good people who are unwilling to serve in government because they're afraid of their own safety. And we can't encourage people to take the law into their own hands. That means it's wrong to pardon the insurrectionists from January 6th. That sends a message that political violence is okay. And it's also wrong to come out on social media just a couple days after this shooting claiming that the left or that Democrats are Marxists, hate this country, and are trying to tear it down and must be defeated. That's the type of rhetoric that's dangerous. And I certainly won't participate in it. If you disagree with me on any issue, you're still my neighbor. And that golden rule says, I love you as I love myself. Folks, let's be better. Let's remember our neighbors and our friends can be our neighbors and our friends first, and members of a political party second or third. Let's make sure that we speak up, say political violence is not okay, and it's time to turn down that rhetoric so that our leaders actually sound like leaders. You're listening to the Andy Bashir podcast. Next up, my weekly conversation with the Johns. John Rabinowitz, an attorney and small business owner, and John McConnell, who owns an insurance company and gets involved in a lot of other things as well. We're going to talk about what happened this last week, things we may see in the weeks to come, with a goal to lift you up, to give you a little more hope, but also to give our direct analysis without debating reality about the things that we're seeing. This week, we'll start off with by far the oldest member of this panel, John McConnell.
There we go. Now it starts. You just have a birthday. It's automatic.
Happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
I mean,
Thank you.
do you feel different?
Yeah, everything hurts. I'm tired, and I think I have no more pepper left. I think it's just all salt now.
Little hair.
Yeah, just I got a little bit of hair left. But hey, good to have everybody back on set again this week. Going to kick it off with a little bit of news that we're all seeing out there in the headlines.
Tough
news. Tough week. Yeah, tough news. Really, really tough news. Minnesota, the attacks that appear to be motivated, and kind of how that's affecting us as a country. Now we look at it.
You know, it's horrific. I would like to say that it's shocking, but it seems like every few weeks we're either talking about a shooting in a school or we're talking about a shooting involving legislators. And what's kind of really concerning on it, when I first heard about it, of course, I was shocked, even though we do hear about it a lot. But where I was only had 2 or 3 channels, and ironically enough, the 2 or 3 channels were CNN, BBC, and Fox News. And instead of, like, when I flipped on one channel, instead of like hearing about the facts, immediately on every channel it was slanted one way or the other. And I thought it was it was awful to watch. It was awful to see, awful to hear about. And it's really scary for people that want to get into politics. And I know we talked about this with Shapiro. Andy, I don't know how you deal with it day to day, quite frankly. And, you know, is it worth it? Is it, like, when you think about it? And it's a scary thing.
Yeah, we're talking about the assassination of the former Speaker of the House of Minnesota and her husband, and then the attempted murder of another legislator and his wife. And for listeners of the podcast, this is actually pretty close. U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar had dinner with them either that night or the night before. These are good friends of Tim Walz, who was on the program, just last episode. So these are people that are just, one relationship removed from me, or even from listeners on the podcast, and being somebody that's lost one of his closest friends in a mass shooting. I feel for Senator Klobuchar. I feel for Tim, because I know what their grief journey is going to be like, and it's hard. And so I first want to make sure that we're saying all violence is wrong, and all families go through terrible things when they have to experience this. But the chilling effect that this has, being absolutely politically motivated, it means we got to do so much better. I hated to see rhetoric just 2 days later calling the other side enemies of the United States. And that came from the president. Or then to see the senator from Utah seeming to make light of it, or to even lift it up, is just wrong. And it's wrong against anyone. And we lose ourselves when we don't condemn it and all violence outright. And then people try to find an advantage or an angle to it. And that just compounds how wrong it is.
And these are public servants,
yeah,
who are trying to, you may not agree with them.
And then vote them out.
Right. They're voicing what their constituents put them in office to voice. And it is, I'll tell you, it's scary, and it is chilling. Like, good candidates are not going to run because they don't want to put their family in harm's way. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know. Do we offer protection for all these legislators? It just seems, but even with the president, there is an assassination attempt.
Well, we need to do more.
Yeah.
And whether that's safety audits on legislators' homes, certainly a good security system, and a dog go a long way, though there are times that more is needed. But we've also just got to turn the temperature down. I think we've done a good job of that in Kentucky overall, but we can't be talking about our disagreements in politics, suggesting this side or that side hates America or is coming for your family. None of that is helpful. None of it's right. None of it comports with our faith and values. And I talk about this a little more in the My Kentucky Accent segment.
It's scary. And it's going to make it more difficult, like what you said, John, to point out, to get more people to run for those state and those local offices.
So right around this time, we had an interesting Saturday where all of this had been going on. You had protests going on nationwide, primarily peaceful. There were a couple people who got out of line and will be held accountable, but you saw a lot of people show up and make sure that they exercise their constitutional right to say that they disagreed with things going on in this country. And at the same time, we had a military parade through Washington, D.C. to celebrate the anniversary of the formation of the U.S. Army that happened to fall on the president's birthday, just some major coincidence or so, he says. What'd y'all think of that?
Well, also, too, I mean, the Navy and the Marines both had birthdays as well, and I've yet to hear about their parade. And as John said, I had a belated birthday. There were no parades for me.
You did not get a giant military parade?
I did not.
Well, listen, I'm all about celebrating the military, and what this is 250, right? Almost as old as you. Close.
I was there.
I have heard that the president was inspired in 2017 with Bastille Day to have something like this. I want your thoughts on whether both of you guys think this was a good recruiting tool, because I know it was messaged a lot that way, to show our military strength and to promote our military.
I think it could possibly be if maybe what had happened at Fort Bragg hadn't happened right before, which was the president giving a highly partisan political speech on a military base. Now, I think where you're coming from is embracing patriotism is an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And we've got to make sure that we don't politicize patriotism. We need people from all backgrounds to be willing to serve in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines. We need to make sure that we are fostering a love for our country. And listen, it is patriotic to speak out when you disagree with someone, but to do so peacefully. It's patriotic to support the military. I just think it's important in all of this to recognize that patriotism is about supporting the country. The pledge is to the flag. None of it is to one individual person. And we should never confuse that, because that can only increase the divide in our country.
Yeah, and I'm curious also, guys, when I was watching one of those 3 television stations, there was one station that was saying, listen, we think this is an attempt to scare our own citizens. You talked a little bit about some of the protests going on, the No King protests across the country. Did you look at it that way, John? Or
I didn't.
Okay.
I mean, I think it was probably there to make a big deal out of a celebration to get everyone together. If you're going to lift up the military branches, lift them all up and do it in a way.
The media tried to make this about immigration when all the protests were originally scheduled as a response to the military parade on the birthday, which, by the way, at $140 million estimated cost, is about half of what Kentucky needs from the federal government to respond to our last flooding event that they haven't yet granted. And so all the other things said, if they are trying to preserve tax dollars and they're going to spend $140 million helping us recover from a natural disaster, would have been helpful. But I think when they tried to cast it, the media, with the background of immigration is where that scare idea came in. And I think that comes in from the difference between believing we should enforce our laws and how we enforce them. Like, I believe that border security is national security, and we have to enforce our laws on immigration, but how we enforce them show our humanity. Do we want people's legs shackled? Do you want a military Humvee pulling up in your neighborhood in the middle of the night and people jumping out in body armor with masks? Is that the type of enforcement we want? Because I can tell you from somebody who has to lead a police unit in this job and the others, sometimes they get the address wrong.
So you're thinking maybe if Elon wouldn't have broke up, this would have been a Doge target to not have the parade?
I don't know. What about the rallies in Kentucky? Were they all peaceful? I was not in state.
They were. They attracted a large number of people, but they all broke off and broke up at that time. You know, what I encourage people is when you protest, keep it peaceful, do it during the daytime hours. Don't let someone hijack your protest, put their voice on top of yours and turn what could be the expression of constitutional rights into something that you don't support.
Sure.
Well, hopping over to the big beautiful bill and its latest changes. Eddie, you've been keeping up with this. I know I'm watching it on behalf of Kentucky for sure.
Now, to me, this is a big, ugly bill. Maybe I should coin a term like our president. It's the bugly bill. But all humor aside, current version kicks 16 million people off their health care coverage. It's projected to close 35 rural hospitals in Kentucky. Thousands, tens of thousands of people are going to go hungry. It's going to blow a hole in the budget of our states. And yes, it adds to the federal deficit in trillions of dollars.
But some form of this bill you believe will pass.
We'll see. You know, it a different version will come out of the Senate and then it'll come back to the House. But if they want to hurt the American people in those everyday concerns of being able to see a doctor when you're sick and being able to feed your family, it's not going to be positive for them electorally. And I know that's where all the analysis goes, but mainly it's just going to hurt a lot of families that are trying but struggle.
And I'll kick it over. There's some baseball games still going on. I'd like to say congratulations to a certain team. I know. John,
Listen, go Cards.
Okay.
We're pretty excited about their win. And now, I guess tomorrow they face Oregon State, who they lost to already. So it's going to be a tough game. And then after that, if they happen to pull off the win, I think then play Coastal Carolina. So it's going to be some tough games, but we're excited. And what about your Murray State Racers?
I mean, Murray State, the Cinderella story in baseball of the year by far. I mean, playing unbelievable ball, getting to the very end of this, and finding themselves in the World Series in Omaha.
What an experience.
In 80, 2 teams from the state.
2 teams from the state. And to wrap it up, John Rabinowitz missed our last episode because he was on a trip with his daughters, given one had just graduated to Alaska. John always talks about fishing. We figured they were always stories. But if you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing John and his prize catches.
I'd like to see these pictures. Do we got film of this? I don't know what's
John
going on.
Rabinowitz is going to get his first mead.
I
That's
love it.
Your first
Listen, we
mead.
crushed it in Alaska. Listen, Kentucky's a beautiful state, but Alaska was something else. I think that I wasn't expecting to see such beautiful topography. I don't know what I was expecting, but it was awe-inspiring. And if you ever get a chance to go, I would go. And I would go fishing because the salmon and halibut fishing are amazing.
All right.
That's our conversation this week with John and John, where we learned a little and also now know that John Rabinowitz isn't lying about all the fish he catches. You're listening to the Andy Bashir Podcast. Our next segment is one I look forward to and dread all at the same time. It's the next edition of Ask Andy. We've got our producer, Breland Tilford from Media Pros. He's going to read off the questions and then judge me for my answers.
What's a food you tried once and absolutely refused to eat ever again?
So I like a lot of different food, and I like calamari, but I was once served grilled octopus, and that was tough. That was actually tough, and it just wasn't for me.
What's the most ridiculous thing you've ever panic Googled as a parent?
I was definitely about sleep when my kids were young. Will and Lila were born a year and 3 days apart. Don't do that. And both struggled to sleep. Will struggled for about a year, and then Lila was here, and Lila struggled for longer. And so it was Googling, how much sleep do you need to survive? How much sleep do you need before you go crazy? And we made it, and so can every other parent. So parents, you will survive.
What were those moments you remember that got you into politics?
I'd say it's 2 sets of things that happened. The first was the birth of my kids. Talk about a miracle that just changes your life. I remember first Will came into our life and then Lila. And I had the same moment, epiphany, you choose the word, where I looked at them and I thought about the world they were growing up in. And I asked myself, was I doing everything I could to make that the best world possible? And were they better off if I just continued as a lawyer and maybe they'd be more comfortable? Or did I have a greater obligation to them and to other kids to try to change the things out there that needed changing? The other is when I saw what it could do. So my dad was serving in his first term as governor. He had the chance to put the Affordable Care Act in Kentucky to expand Medicaid. All of a sudden, you couldn't lose your coverage for pre-existing conditions. And we're in an elevator, I think in Lexington, and a woman walks onto the elevator and bursts into tears. And when she can finally catch her breath, she looks at him and says, "I'm alive today because of you." She could not get coverage. She could not get treatment that she was going to need. She was going to die because of the problems in our healthcare system. And this job as governor that he had, man, he could do something about it. And there are so many more individuals just like that survived because of it. And then I think you fast forward years later, and I'm governor during the pandemic. And thank God he'd made those decisions, because our rural hospitals were open when others had closed. We had more beds for people. That his decision then not only saved her life, but helped me save lives so many years later.
That's powerful. What's something you used to swear you'd never do when you got older, but catch yourself doing all the time now?
Well, first you're saying I'm older, but the answer is so much. You will become your parents, at least in part. It happens. I remember being 18 during a summer. My dad was running for U.S. Senate, and I was the driver because he didn't have to pay me. I was about to go off to college and just wanted to spend that time with my dad. But what I learned is, as my dad traveled all around the state, we spent so much time in the car, he wouldn't turn on the radio. He was making calls, he was reading something, and I thought, I am not going to survive this summer. And now, what do? I'm in the car doing work. Now that you have these phones where you can get updates on everything, I'm doing work, and I never turn on the radio, and it drives my kids crazy. Now, they have these things called phones where they can listen on their own. So I think it's a little less painful for them than for me. But that's certainly one that I still remember. I will never be that guy, and I most definitely am. So if you're in the car, the way you solve this is turning on the Andy Bashir podcast. Everyone will agree.
I would agree with that too. What's a fashion choice you made in high school that still haunts you?
I think if you start a little bit earlier, my generation made a lot of interesting fashion choices. When we were younger, there were jam shorts. I even played on a soccer team named after jam shorts, and we were decent. Then you go into the phase that I had the bowl cut. I definitely regret that one. Think we're creating a meme right now. Never going to do that again. That's why I've had the same haircut since I was about 14 years old that I have right now. Then there was the Kurt Cobain phase where we all had so much flannel. It could be 90 degrees in the summer, and we were all wearing flannel because that's who we were. and we were going to push back on society. But now flannel's coming back in, so maybe if I can dig through the closet, I can wear it again.
What's something your kids tease you about nonstop?
Everything. So with my son, Will, he is finally taller than me, and by a decent amount. I wouldn't admit it until it just became so obvious, and it drove him crazy that I kept saying, "No, Will, you'll get there one day." And he kept saying, "What?" And standing next to the mirror by me. With my daughter, it's where she wants to go to college. So she found, or I told her about my college experience. Listen, I was fortunate, but I think I thought I was a lot smarter than at least a lot of colleges thought I was when I applied. I think I applied to 10 and I got into 2. It was pretty humbling for someone who thought that they were going to get into all these. And the only 2 I got into were the ones I hadn't visited. Now, I ended up going to an amazing university. It was the right thing for me. But my daughter teases me about it because she wants to go to any of the 8 that I couldn't get into just to prove that she can do what I couldn't. And, I'm all for it, Lila.
I wouldn't be surprised if she follows in your footsteps. Vanderbilt, right?
Vanderbilt was a great experience for me, but a scholarship to any of those, and she's done better than I did. Scholarship.
Yeah.
That's a wrap on episode 11 of the Andy Bashir podcast. I hope you enjoyed our interview with Wes Moore. We certainly learned that he's probably the best sous chef to serve as governor in the country. Also hope you enjoyed the conversation with the Johns and got something out of my Kentucky accent where I talked about how political violence is never the answer. We've dealt with a whole lot over the last week. So I hope watching or listening to this episode lifted you up, gave you just a little bit of hope, and prepared you for the week to come. Just remember, no matter what we face, we'll make it through it as long as we stick together. Remember, you can download us on all major platforms or subscribe to our YouTube channel at Andy Bashir Podcast. Your downloads and your subscriptions are what keep us going and keeps this conversation going. So make sure you're a part of it, and let's do this together.